When we as a culture who shift and evolve over time in our morality, we say we're the center of determining what's right and wrong, then we create our own theology, our own practices. But Jesus very intentionally begins each letter saying he is the authority. So we see the pattern starting in these letters, and we begin with the authority of Jesus. So Jesus presents himself with 7 titles, different titles, but they all show authority, which represents total authority over the church. So there are specific descriptors, but again, we gotta take 7 as a whole, a symbolic number. So Jesus is saying, I have total and complete authority over the church then and now. In another letter, he says it this way, him who has the sharp, double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. So he's speaking truth, he's speaking judgment upon the people, but it's all rooted in love to cause them to turn around and have a relationship with him. And I think we're seeing a shift in our culture today, especially with regard to religion. And there's this shift that I am the ultimate authority, that I determine morally what's right and what's wrong, and it just doesn't work with the Christian faith. I was having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and they've been de-churched for a while, a number of years, and they're talking about getting back engaged into church. And this person had 3 very specific moral and theological things that they said, this is what we are looking for in a church. And I knew at that time it wasn't a time for a theological debate, that wasn't the time for that. But I left that conversation thinking to myself, those are all very valid, complex moral theological issues. But those are not the right starting point. The right starting point is who is God and who determines truth. See, that's dangerous. When we as a culture who shift and evolve over time in our morality, we say we're the center of determining what's right and wrong, then we create our own theology, our own practices. But Jesus very intentionally begins each letter saying he is the authority. He is the total, complete authority over all church as a whole and individual morality in our own life. Now, I want you to think about, in your own life, think of a great teacher that you've had, or a great coach, or a great boss, and think about what qualities and characteristics make them great. My boss is incredible. She's leading me for a number of years, and she's smart, she's funny, she's intelligent, she's a great leader. Smart, funny. Her handwriting is really hard to read, but she has this amazing balance of grace and truth, love and correction in my life. And so recently, over the past couple months, there's been a couple times in our one-on-one meetings where she's brought correction to me. And I can hear it and respond really well because I trust her and I know she knows she wants what's best for me. So she would share, hey, you've been functioning this way in this meeting consistently, and it's just not helpful. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally right. And I apologize. I'm going to change my behavior. And so we see that in these kinds of relationships. How much more with Jesus, who is the greatest leader of all time? And yes, he is bringing correction, but it's from a heart of love that wants what's best for the churches then and the churches now. We see in John 1, it says that Jesus came full of grace and truth, love, correction. John 15, it shows the kind of leader that Jesus was and still is today. It says that greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Just as my parents wanted to get this delinquent back in line by correcting me with my Christmas light bulb incident, Jesus wants to move the people of God back in line under his authority and healthy leadership. Next, see this pattern of authority. Now we move into correction. It says Jesus corrects the church in Laodicea for being apathetic and ineffective. Back to verse 15. I know your deeds, and that word deeds is really important. He's evaluating how they've been living out their life in culture. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. So here's where I think we get misinterpreted with this. And I've heard it recently in the past couple weeks, this misinterpretation of this verse. So what we see is this temperature spectrum is a spectrum of faith. We say hot, that is burning passion, fire for Jesus. We see cold would be an atheist or far from God. And we see lukewarm is somewhere in the middle. And I've always wrestled with that being a faith illustration. I don't think it's true. Because I've sat there and thought, why would Jesus, yes, we want hot, passionate faith, right? But why would Jesus want cold faith or no faith? And when you dig into the culture and context of Laodicea, you understand it. See, they were a very wealthy, self-sufficient, prideful church and city, but the thing the city lacked was a great and strong water supply. It had a river that ran through it, but it was a very slow-moving river, and almost every year it would dry up and they wouldn't have water from that river. But thankfully, there were two major water sources close by. One was in the city of Hierapolis to the north, and it was known on these cliffs they would have very hot, chemically charged water that would come out and they would have medicinal purposes. And the Romans were known for building great aqueducts that are still there today. And so what they would do is transport this hot water 11 miles into Laodicea, and by the time the water arrived, it would be lukewarm, and all the chemicals would be concentrated together, and you couldn't drink it. And if you did drink it, you would get sick, thus spitting it out. Now to the south, Colossae was the other city, and they had a great water supply as well. And it was up high, it was this cold, refreshing mountain spring water. And they would transport it 4 or 5 miles into the city, but because of the heat of the area, it would become lukewarm, and no one wants to drink lukewarm water. So this is what Jesus is saying here. It's not faith, but it is faith. It's their effectiveness in the culture. He's saying, you're far from me, and I'm evaluating your deeds, and you're useless. You're ineffective in your faith, and you're not living out your faith. I know your deeds. He's assessing them and saying, stop it. Like, come back to me and be restored, be refilled in our faith.